everyone. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone.
For joining. Let me grab my thing here.
Yeah.
All right, so extremely excited to be here, Cloud Native University. I'm very passionate about teaching stuff, and I'm here with Julia, who is also like very into that. So super happy. So the title of the presentation is Streaming Application Development: The Power of Cloud Native Tools. We will be talking a little bit about application development, not Kubernetes development, not extensions to Kubernetes, but mostly what Cloud Native application developers do, and the tasks that they go through and the tools that they can use to speed up that process. And
and I think this talk is more to set the foundation, especially for developers in the audience, because you come to KubeCon and you're overwhelmed with so many tools, so many projects, and you ask yourself, how does it fit into my development workflow? So that's why we decided to give you this talk.
Yep. And I'm here with Julia.
Yes, presenting myself, I'm a global technologist at Veeam. I'm also a CNCF ambassador, an AWS container hero. I organize some events in New York, which Danielle will be the keynote, the KCD New York this year. We are really excited. And Mauricio said he loves teaching. He's been teaching me a lot, so I'm very thankful to Mauricio.
Oh, no, that's my pleasure. It's always good to help new people coming into this space, because again, it's a very complicated space. My name is Mauricio Salatino. I'm also a CNCF ambassador. I wrote a book titled Platform Engineering on Kubernetes that, in my opinion, is a very complicated subject. That's why I wrote the book, but at the same time, I realized that even that for a developer might be too much. I'm working for a project that it's called Dapr. You will be hearing a lot about this project quite a lot during this week because it graduated last year, so we are doing a lot of work there. And again, it aims to help developers in their process. And I'm also working with the application development working group. That's changing, but again, we are trying to get developers closer to the CNCF by building the right channels and the right materials for developers to feel more comfortable in this space.
Can you all hear us well?
Can you hear us well?
Can you give us a thumbs up?
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's good.
Thank you.
And I wanted to do something here. The first time that I'm going to show this slide for everyone, because this went live yesterday night.
Woo! Let's give him a round of applause. Woohoo!
Thanks so much. So I am doing something crazy, which is writing another book. It's titled Developer Experience on Kubernetes. I do feel that there is a huge gap in the ecosystem. There are tons of things that you need to learn in order to get started. We want to reduce that journey for developers. We want to build new tools on that space and promote open source tools that will help developers to be more efficient. So this is coming. We published the early access program for this book. That basically means that you have access to the drafts of the chapters if you're interested. We do write these books as part of a community process. We reach out to all the projects that we are going to cover. We ask for help. We ask for feedback. So if you are interested in that, feel free to reach out. You don't really need to buy anything. We build all the examples in the open. And if you want to get the book, that also helps, of course. So yeah, you got the premiere of the book. And the main reason, again, for this presentation, the book, and another, like all the other stuff that we are doing here in CNCF, is to try to help people that gets overwhelmed by the amount of things that they need to learn when they think about Kubernetes containers. We are at KubeCon, so you will be hearing a lot about Kubernetes. We kind of assume that if you are coming here, you kind of know about Kubernetes, but if you go to companies and large organizations, scaling up how people learn Kubernetes is really hard. I would love to ask to this audience, how many people here is coming to KubeCon for the first time?
Wow, almost everyone.
So, yeah, that's kind of like
welcome.
Amazing. We are always surprised. We have been doing KubeCons for some years now, and it's always good to see how many new people join these conferences. So welcome. You're going to have an amazing week. It's quite intense, but it's pretty amazing. So welcome. So let's start with basic stuff, right? When you talk to developers and you ask them what they do, what they basically do is they transform an idea or a requirement into software that will run in front of your customers, right? That's the most basic definition of how developers think about their work. They just get a requirement, they will translate that requirement into software, they will do something with it, probably run it, test it locally, and then just ship it in some way or another to the hosting or like the servers where this is going to run in front of customers. If you think from this perspective, they will need to use a bunch of different tools in order to get this done. So it's not quite straightforward. That's why if you start looking about the definitions of the phases in which developers work or think, you will find some sort of this diagram where you get the requirement on one end. There are like tons of bibliography about like how to write good requirements, how to use user stories, the tools that you can use to specify your requirements in Jira, GitHub issues, a bunch of other software that it's basically focused on that space. Then you have the inner loop, which is how the developer translates these requirements into software. And then the outer loop, which is basically all the other things that needs to happen to get those changes that the developer is working into a production environment where it's going to run in front of your customers. That's where you actually achieve value. That's why people pay developers to do that work, because they want the customers to get new stuff out, right? So if you look outside, like in the internet, you will find pretty much the same like inner and outer developer loops described in different ways depending on who is telling you the story, right? Depending if it's like a vendor of tools that is focused on the inner loop, on making the developer more efficient, or if it's more about like how do we deploy software into production with like CI tools, GitOps tools, they will be focused more on the outer loop. You will see the different tasks inside these phases, and it's quite important for us to understand that the developer is most of the time working on the inner loop, and they need to be very efficient on that side of the picture, right? We will not be touching too much on the outer loop, but I think it's also important just to make sure that the developer understands what happens after they finish making the changes. Again, if you look for these into different vendors, this is coming from Red Hat, you will see they will annotate this picture with different tools depending on the solutions that they have for the different phases. And this is pretty good because it gives you a more concrete path of these are the tools that are being used in this phase, while we move to the outer loop, we will focus on different tools. And again, I think that when we talk about Kubernetes and containers, the diagrams becomes a little bit more complicated because again, Kubernetes, the idea is that you can architect your applications in a way that it's pretty close to how they are going to run in a production environment. So if you shift left and start bringing Kubernetes closer to the developers, then they need now to do a bunch of other tasks that they were not doing before containers, before using containers or before using Kubernetes. So there is always this question, is how close we bring Kubernetes to developers and what kind of tools can we use to make that process a little bit smoother. So in this presentation now, Julia is going to be talking a little bit about different projects that we have divided into two different spaces. Speeding up the inner development loop, this initial phase where developers work, and then enabling developers by providing different capabilities in the environments where they work. For example, APIs to solve common distributed challenges, feature flagging to make sure that they can keep releasing software without being stopped by the features that they are releasing, or using different release strategies that will allow them to run multiple versions at the same time of their software to try out and see if the things that they are changing make sense to their customers or if they are actually working as they expected.
So yeah, we've picked a few tools. There are a lot more, we could stay the whole day, the whole week talking about all the tools in the CNCF landscape. It is a little overwhelming, but if you choose just a few and try to break them down and try them yourself, I think that's the best way to start if you're new to the CNCF landscape. But we're going to talk about a few use cases. So to start with, we're going to talk about a common challenge that developers, us, have faced while we're working on an application that will eventually work in Kubernetes, but we're working on it locally, and we need to connect it to a database or a message queue to test our code. So usually we use Docker. It's our go-to tool, and it's an amazing tool. But there is also an alternative that is part of the CNCF landscape. And this helps us avoid that common meme, it worked on my machine. And the tool is called Podman. So Podman is a CNCF project that gives you the same familiar container experience as Docker, but without the daemon and in a rootless mode. So now you don't have, background processes hogging your resources. You don't have sudo or weird root privileges. And your containers work exactly as you expect. Under the hood, Podman uses container runtimes like runc or crun to ensure that the compatibility between the OCI standards. So it makes Podman really easy to use and integrate into your existing workflows. Also, Podman is Kubernetes native, obviously, if it's part of the CNCF landscape. So with one simple command, you can generate YAML files. And with that, if you're using it locally, you can switch and use it in your Kubernetes clusters. How many of you here have tried Podman? Can you raise your hand? Okay, great.
That's good.
So yeah, a few have heard and tried it.
Yeah.
And it's great. Do you want to add?
Yeah. So basically, if you haven't tried Podman, give it a try. This is a project that was created by Red Hat. And I really like that approach mostly because they looked into both sides of the equation, right? So you have containers in the middle, you have developers on one side, and then you have Kubernetes clusters on the other, right? And they actually have to spend a lot of time into making sure that the entire journey is pretty smooth. So not only allowing you to create, for example, local Kubernetes clusters, but also going and integrating with, frameworks in the developer space to make that journey easier for very specific developers, right? So if you're a Node developer or a Java developer, they have tools that actually integrate in the frameworks that you're using to enable like quick deployments to Kubernetes clusters. All those things makes a big improvement in the development experience, where, in my opinion, I love Docker as well. I've been using Docker for a long time. But Docker was always focused on let's make the container experience really good, but the Kubernetes side of things and the developer side of things, they try to stay away, at least in my opinion. So if you haven't tried this, give it a try. The idea here is that you install it, you get the same experience as Docker, you have a compatibility layer with Docker, so pretty much you just keep using the same.
Now we have our local container setup running, but building images is also a hard part of the equation. I don't think anyone wakes up excited in the morning to build a Docker file or build a container image. And we all worry if it's secure, if it's, production ready. It's hard to build really good container images. So maybe you've written something like this. It's very simple, right? An image like this. But the thing is, we have to ask ourselves, is it secure enough to run in production? Did we set a non-root user here? And did we optimize the image size? We cannot accidentally leave debugging tools in our installed in the image. So writing container images manually for quick tests is great, but for production is risky. That's why there is another CNCF project called the Buildpacks, which automates the process of creating containers, ensuring that the images are consistent, are production ready, are secure, and are reproducible. So what they do, basically, they automatically detect the application's languages, frameworks, the dependencies, and they streamline the build process. And the best thing of all is that when you need to update something, let's say there is a security patch that is released, you don't have to rebuild the entire application. You can just rebase the base image, and that will keep the other layers, the existing layers, and you don't have to rebuild everything. So with that, you have faster updates, and that reduces downtime for your entire team.
Yeah, same. I think that this is a very important tool in the sense that it will recognize the language that the application is using, and then it will automatically create a default container for that application. But I think that it's also important from the other side, from people who is responsible for creating secure images, because imagine that you have in the previous example here, like in the node-based image, right? If you have a vulnerability there, you don't really want to repackage and rebuild your application. You can just replace that base layer image with the updated version that doesn't have any security issues, and then just ship that into production. So I think that this is a very important tool. How many people here knows about Buildpack?
Okay.
It's not that many, and again, it's one of these tools that it was created by Heroku, and I think that it made kind of like a lot of sense. Now we are kind of like encouraging people just to take a look and then just use, because it's going to solve some very specific problems that you will have when building container images. And again, it will save the need for developers to write Docker files, which is something, again, that for testing, for quick application development is super fun. But when you make serious applications, it becomes way much more complicated. You don't want developers to add to have to maintain 200 lines of Docker files.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Now we've made it easier to build and run containers, but once we push the image to production, how do we ensure that everything goes smoothly? And if something goes wrong, how can we roll back in an easy manner? Also, if there is a bug, we don't want it to show up in production. We don't want to risk disrupting our customers, especially paid customers. If we want to test live changes, we want to do it in an easy manner. So we want to find a balance into being fast, building fast, and also being careful. So this is a hard balance to find. And for that, there is another tool. It's actually a Kubernetes controller that allows you to release features gradually, monitor their impact, and roll back quickly if something bad goes wrong. So you can deploy Argo rollouts on your Kubernetes clusters and start using strategies like canary releases or blue-green deployment. And that lets you roll out your application and to a small group. Let's say you have 3-tier clients, and then if anything is wrong, you can roll back. And also with that, you can keep a stable version for your paying clients, for example, and then if everything is good, you can roll all the features to the paying customers as well. And that helps you test stability and performance with a set of group, and then you can increase to everyone, all the other customers.
Yeah, and as we mentioned at the beginning, right, this is not a tool that developers will use, but this is a capability that developers should rely on, right? They should know that they are building new features, they are releasing things that they are testing, but at the same time, they need to be able to feel confident to push that to the next phase. In this case, if you can test, the new features against live traffic coming from some customers that maybe they are not paying, I think it's a great way to validate and provide feedback to developers that their changes are working as expected.
Yeah. But once the features are deployed, how can you control who gets to see them? Maybe, again, you want just a set of customers or, beta testers to see specific features, and you want to be able to toggle them on and off. Maybe you want to gather feedback or gradually introduce specific changes. For that, there is also another project from the CNCF called OpenFeature. So it's like having a remote control for your features. You can toggle your features on and off, and you can dynamically do that without needing to redeploy your application. So let's say you just want to show your features to a segment of customers, or from customers from a specific region, or you want to do A/B testing. Open features allow you to do all of that. So while you're coding, maybe your product team or they can show the features, and then you can keep building the application, and you can do that while they're live in production. And you can also test features, experimental features with a selected user group base, and it gives you a lot of flexibility with the features in your application.
Yeah, feature flagging usually promotes that idea of continuous deployment and delivery of software. So the idea is you keep delivering, creating new versions of your software, but then you allow product managers to toggle on and off the features depending on the needs from the business. So again, it's like you enable developers to go fastest, create more features. OpenFeature will give you SDKs for you to use in different programming languages, so you can actually start building the features behind feature flags from day one. Check it out if you haven't seen this, because it's a pretty cool project.
Anyone has heard of OpenFeature here?
You have some OpenFeature folks?
Yeah, well, now you have.
Yeah, good.
Great. Now, what about asynchronous communication between your services, your microservices? How do you handle that without having to learn a bunch of infrastructure or other things that you don't have time to learn? There is an amazing tool Dapr, which Mauricio will talk even more about it, but Dapr actually abstracts the communication between microservices. So it gives you an API for services, service-to-service call, or state management, pub/sub, without locking your application to a specific infrastructure. And with that, you have the freedom and flexibility to use any stack that you want, depending on what the language that you're building your application. You're not tied into a specific language tool. So these are some of the APIs that Dapr provides. Let's go to the next one. You want to talk a little bit about
Yeah, definitely.
this?
So quickly, like for developers, again, as Julia was mentioning, you know, when you're building like a distributed application, you will need to face and solve different challenges. In this case, we are talking about like service-to-service, you know, interactions in an asynchronous way. And for that, you will need to basically have a message broker. If you ask your developers to learn about like something like Kafka, ActiveMQ, or even like the cloud provider services like Google PubSub or Amazon SQS, they will spend some time learning about the specifics on how to use this technology, but then they will need to add some dependencies to their applications to be able to connect to these services, right? And for each provider, for each of these message brokers, you will need to learn different details. What Dapr does is basically it provides an API that decouple the implementation details of that specific message broker from the application developer. So as you can see, application A has a method, like a function that basically says publish event. And application B has a method that says consume events, right? That's the only thing that application developers needs to know in order to exchange asynchronous messages. And then the platform engineering team will configure Dapr and how it connects to Kafka, ActiveMQ, or Google PubSub in this case. The application code doesn't change. You keep using the same APIs, but you can move your application across environments pretty easily. Again, this is another capability that platform teams can provide developers to improve the speed of development.
Who has heard of Dapr here? Great.
Dapr folks,
yeah, someone
very excited there.
Yeah.
Good.
So now, lastly is how do we actually know what's going on in our system, in our applications? How do we manage logs, metrics, and traces to observe and troubleshoot what's going on in our microservices? So for that, we have a very known project, which is OpenTelemetry. And OpenTelemetry standardizes how we collect data from different systems, different services. And regardless if you're using Kubernetes, also serverless, any microservice, you have full visibility and you can observe what's going on in a unified way, in a unified place. And now you're not just reacting to issues, you can troubleshoot before anything happens. So gives you a lot of power into your applications. You can see exactly and pinpoint what's going on in your applications.
I think that from the last three projects, talking about Open Feature Flag, Dapr, and OpenTelemetry, we are talking about three projects that promote common interfaces to use. So if you look at Open Feature Flag, they provide SDKs for different languages. If you look at Dapr, we provide different SDKs for different languages, and OpenTelemetry provide SDKs for different languages. When you see SDKs, that basically means that these are things that developers will need to think, and they will need to integrate into their applications. That's usually, it should be easy, but it's not that easy, so you need to think about these interfaces are going to simplify operations things later on. It will make your path from your applications to production much smoother. So we totally recommend to do that. 2 minutes. Let's do it.
So we have shown you a set of tools that can help you with your development, make it go faster, and help you with your cloud native journey. But the most important takeaway of this presentation is that you're here at KubeCon, so try to make the most out of it, ask questions, you have people that know more about these tools, and they are building these tools, that are maintainers, contributors of these tools. And if you're a developer, check out the application development track. And don't be shy, make friends, ask questions. We are here, everyone is so friendly and wanna have a chat about, what you're working on, what challenges that you're facing.
Yeah, we are all here learning, right? So feel free to ask questions, feel free to share your knowledge, because that's the main reason why we traveled so far.
And lastly, we have a QR code with a GitHub repo with resources for each of these projects. So, you know, documentation and if you want to get started, how to get started, workshops, etc. You feel free to check them out. Also, another shout out to Mauricio for his newly released book.
Yep.
And he's giving another talk as well about application development.
Yeah, so we are presenting with Thomas Vitale, the co-author of the book, a presentation on Friday. So if you are still around, please show up there if you're interested in developer experience. We will be going through a little bit more in detail what the book is about, but also like the main challenges that we are trying to tackle in there when we talk about the development experience. Thomas is a great, developer. Like he has been doing development for long, and he's kind of an expert on that space. So I'm super happy to be doing that. That's Friday, 2:30 p.m.
Yeah, 2:30. And with that, thank you so much for being here. Feel free to connect with us. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
And have fun.
Yeah, have fun. That's